My name is Sara Nguyen. I'm 28. On November 22, 2024 at 6:14 p.m., my father stood up at my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner and told 43 people that I was the biggest disappointment of his life. Not in those exact words, he was too careful for that, but he said, "Some of us chose the hard path, some of us chose to serve," and then he looked directly at me. Everyone understood what he meant. I didn't throw my napkin down, I didn't cry. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap, looked at my water glass, and thought in 61 days they're going to find out. They had no idea. Let me tell you about the Ngans of Houston, Texas. My father, Dr. Thomas Nguyen, is a cardiothoracic surgeon at Houston Methodist. My mother, Dr. Thomas Nguyen, is a cardiothoracic surgeon at Houston Methodist. My mother, Dr. Thomas Nguyen, Linda Nguyen, runs a private internal medicine practice with a wait list so long she stopped taking new patients 4 years ago. My older brother Kevin is 32. He's an orthopedic surgeon at UT Southwestern in Dallas, engaged to a woman who is also a physician. Their wedding is next spring. Every RSVP'd guest has at least one advanced degree. My younger sister Lily is 25. She's a second-year resident in emergency medicine at Baylor. She works 30-hour shifts and still finds time to text her mother updates about her cases. My mother posts about Lily on Facebook with a frequency that I can only describe as clinical. Then there is me. I graduated from UT Austin with a degree in business, not pre-med. Business. My father called it a starter degree at my graduation dinner and laughed like he'd said something clever. I enrolled in law school at the University of Houston because it felt like the closest acceptable path I could stomach. I lasted 14 months. I withdrew on a Tuesday in February 2023. I didn't tell anyone for 3 weeks. When I finally told my parents, my father went very quiet. That was worse than yelling. My mother said, "Sarah, you have to think about your future," as though I hadn't been doing exactly that. My father said, "We'll give you 6 months to figure this out." Not a question, a deadline. I nodded. I said, "Okay." I did not tell them what I was actually figuring out. Here's what they didn't know. The week before I withdrew from law school, I'd already filed my LLC. Riverstone Creative Co., registered in Texas, with a registered agent address in Austin. I had already signed my first client, a regional home goods brand out of San Antonio that had been running the same Facebook ads since 2019. And couldn't understand why their cost per acquisition kept climbing. I charged them $2,400 a month to fix it. I fixed it in 11 days. Their ROAS went from 1.4 to 6.8. Word travels fast in e-commerce circles when you actually know what you're doing. By the end of 2023, Riverstone had 8 clients. My revenue was $340,000. I had one contractor helping me with copy, another handling reporting. I worked from my apartment in Austin. I kept my blinds shut most of the day because I was always on calls with clients in different time zones. My father called twice that year, once to remind me that my 6-month deadline had passed, once to tell me Kevin had been accepted to a fellowship he'd been pursuing. He didn't ask how I was doing on either call. I attended 4 family events in 2023, Thanksgiving, Christmas, my parents' anniversary dinner in July, and Kevin's engagement party in October. Each one followed the same structure. Kevin's latest achievement, Lily's latest shift story, and then, when a relative asked about me, my mother would smile in a way that didn't reach her eyes and say, "Sarah is doing some work in marketing." The word "some" carrying a freight container of doubt. My aunt once asked, "Is it going well?" And my mother said, "She seems to enjoy it," in the same tone you'd use to describe a child who'd taken up finger painting. I smiled. I said nothing. Because at that exact moment, Riverstone had just closed its largest client to date, a DTC skincare brand based in Miami that had $11 million in annual revenue and a performance marketing budget that made my previous clients look like garage sales. The contract was worth $18,000 a month. I did not mention this. I let them think what they wanted. It made what was coming feel more like justice. My best friend Priya knew everything. She'd been my roommate at UT Austin, and she was the only person who'd watched me rebuild from zero after leaving law school. She was there the night I signed my first client, sitting on our old couch with a bottle of Topo Chico and a legal pad, listening to me pitch out loud until I stopped stumbling. She was there when I cried at 2 in the morning because I was scared I'd made the wrong choice. She never once told me to go back. When I got the skincare client, I called her before I called anyone else. "You're gonna outgrow all of them," she said. "I mean that literally." I laughed. I didn't know yet how right she was. My grandmother's 80th birthday dinner was held at a private room at an upscale steakhouse in Houston's Galleria area, 43 people, 3 generations of family, plus assorted plus ones and family friends who'd known my parents since their residency days. My grandmother, who we call Ba, had specifically requested I sit next to her. Ba always liked me. She said I reminded her of herself, which my father found confusing. I drove down from Austin that morning. I wore a dark green wrap dress and earrings Ba had given me when I graduated college. I brought her a custom photo book I'd designed myself, 50 years of family photos organized chronologically. She cried when she opened it. That was the best part of the night. Dinner was fine until the speeches. My father gave the first one. He talked about my grandmother's sacrifices, about leaving Vietnam in 1979 with nothing, about building a life from the ground up, about the legacy of service she'd instilled in the family. It was a good speech. He'd clearly practiced it. Then my uncle gave one. Then Kevin stood up and said something about Bob being the reason he became a doctor, which made her cry again. Then Lily, who was still technically on post-call recovery, gave a toast that got a standing ovation. Then my father looked at the room and said with his wine glass still raised, "Our family has always believed in earning things, in choosing the hard path, in careers that mean something, in serving people." His eyes moved around the table as he spoke. When they landed on me, they stayed just a half second longer. Some of us understand that, and I'm proud of the ones who do. He sat down. My mother raised her glass toward Kevin and Lily. Nobody clapped exactly, but people made sounds of agreement. And Uncle nodded. My cousin, who is in pharmacy school and has always reminded me of a golden retriever, eager to please and easily excited, said absolutely under his breath like he was agreeing with a sermon. Boss squeezed my hand under the table. She didn't say anything. She just held it. I squeezed back. I ate my steak. I answered the questions relatives asked me. Marketing consulting, yes. Mostly e-commerce brands. Yes, it's going well, thank you. I smiled at the appropriate times. I did not tell anyone about the offer I had accepted 6 days earlier. On November 16th, a private equity firm out of New York that specialized in rolling up digital marketing agencies had offered to acquire Riverstone Creative Co. at a valuation of $4.1 million. My ownership stake after 18 months of bringing in 2 contractors as minority partners was 81%. The deal was structured as $3.3 million at close, with an earnout tied to client retention over 18 months that could bring the total to $4.7 million. We were scheduled to close on January 22, 2025. The acquisition would be announced publicly on February 3rd through a press release from the PE firm, which had 12 other agencies in its portfolio and a PR team that knew how to make noise. 61 days. I drove home to Austin that night with the radio off. I thought about what my father had said. Hard path. Serving people. I thought about the skincare client in Miami whose founder had emailed me 3 days earlier to say their November revenue was up 34% year over year and asking if I could take on more scope. I thought about the 2 employees I'd hired full-time in September, both women under 30, both of whom had sent me messages on Thanksgiving morning saying they were grateful for their jobs. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I drove 4 hours in the dark and felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. 61 days. I spent December the way I always did, working. I flew to Miami to do a quarterly review with the skincare client. I flew to Portland to close a new client, a sustainable outdoor gear brand that had been burning money on influencer spend with nothing to show for it. I had 3 calls with the PE firm's legal team about the acquisition documents. I responded to every email from family with the appropriate holiday warmth and told no one anything. My mother texted on December 20th, "Are you coming for Christmas?" Not, "We'd love to have you." Just the question, factual, like a calendar request. "Yes," I replied. "I'll be there the 24th. "Good, Kevin and Allison are bringing a new wine." That was the whole exchange. Christmas was at my parents' house in Sugarland, 6-bedroom brick colonial, the kind of house that announces its seriousness before you even park. My mother had hired a caterer. There was a cheese board the size of a coffee table. My father greeted me at the door with a handshake hug, the kind where only shoulders make contact. Lily pulled me into a real hug in the kitchen and whispered, "I'm so glad you're here. This family needs someone who isn't going to talk about hospital politics all night." I loved her for that. Kevin and Allison were warm and slightly distracted, the way engaged couples are when they're in the middle of planning a wedding. They kept referencing vendors by first name. "Oh, the florist," Marcus said. I smiled and nodded. I liked Kevin. I always had. He was not unkind, just absent in the way people get when they've been fully absorbed by a life that has very little space in it. Dinner was fine. Nobody gave a speech. My father asked me how work was going, which I recognized as a concession because he usually didn't ask at all. "Good," I said, finishing up a strong quarter. "Any plans to grow the business?" he asked, and I could hear in the phrasing that he meant, "Are you still planning to do this? Is this still a phase? When are you going to make a real decision?" "I have a few things in motion," I said. He nodded and turned to ask Kevin about a mutual colleague at UT Southwestern. That was the last conversation we had until February. January 22nd, 2025, 10:08 a.m. Central Standard Time. I was sitting at my kitchen counter in Austin in a hoodie and running shoes. My attorney was on the phone. The PE firm's counsel was on the same call. I had a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The acquisition documents had been reviewed, revised, reviewed again, and were ready. "All parties ready to execute?" my attorney said. "Ready," I said. I signed electronically. I sat there for a minute after the call ended. Riverstone Creative Cone had been acquired. The wire would clear in 3 business days. My net proceeds at close $2,673,000, after taxes, attorney fees, and the payout to my 2 partners, plus the earnout potential over the next 18 months. I texted Priya, "Done." She called me immediately. She was crying before I said anything. "I am so proud of you," she kept saying. "You built that from nothing. Nothing. You know that, right?" I knew that, minus a second mug of coffee. I sat at my counter for a long time looking out at the street. I thought about the Tuesday in February 2023 when I'd withdrawn from law school. I thought about my father's 6-month deadline. I thought about my mother saying, "Some work in marketing" at Thanksgiving with that particular smile. I thought about Ba squeezing my hand at the restaurant. I thought about February 3rd. The 11 days between the close and the announcement were the strangest of my life. The money was in my account, the deal was done, and absolutely no one in my family knew. I went to a yoga class. I called Priya every day. I started looking at properties, not seriously, just looking. I slept well for the first time in months. My mother called on January 30th. "Just checking in," she said, which was unusual. She didn't usually call to check in. "I'm good," I said, busy with some end-of-month stuff. "Are you coming to your cousin Ryan's graduation in March?" "I'll try to make it work." "It would mean a lot to Aunt Christine." "I'll try, Mom." She paused. "Your father wanted me to ask if you've thought any more about what you're doing long-term. He read an article about marketing consultants and he's concerned it's not stable," I said. He didn't use that word. "I know," I said. "Tell him I'm working on long-term plans. I'll have more to share soon." She took that as a non-answer, which was the point. February 3rd, 2025, 8 m.n. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central. I set an alarm for 6:45 a.m. I made pour-over coffee, which I never do because I wanted the ritual of it. At exactly 7 a.m., I opened my laptop. The press release was live. Apex Growth Partners acquires Riverstone Creative Co., expanding its performance marketing portfolio. Austin-based digital marketing agency Riverstone Creative Company, founded by Sara Nguyen, 28, has been acquired by Apex Growth Partners, a New York-based private equity firm with $2.3 billion in assets under management. Riverstone, which specializes in performance marketing for direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands, was founded in 2023 and grew to 18 clients and 12 full-time and contract employees in under 2 years. Nguyen will remain with the agency through a transition period and has been named to Apex's Growth Council, advising newly acquired agencies in their portfolio. 12 clients, 12 employees, founded 2023, 23 months. My phone buzzed within the first hour. LinkedIn notifications, colleagues, former professors, clients I hadn't spoken to in months. Congrats, Sara, huge news. This is incredible, well-deserved. Knew you were going to do something like this? At 8:47 a.m. Central, Priya texted, "It's everywhere. You're everywhere." At 9:12 a.m., I got a text from someone I hadn't heard from in 2 years. A law school classmate. "Wait, is this you, Sara from Houston Law? This is insane. Congratulations." At 9:34 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number with a New York area code. A journalist from Business Insider asking if I had 15 minutes to comment on the acquisition for a piece they were running on PE roll-ups in the marketing space. I said yes. We talked for 22 minutes. My father saw it on LinkedIn at 10:03 a.m. I know the exact time because my brother Kevin told me later. Kevin had been sent the Business Insider article by a colleague at UT Southwestern who recognized my name. Kevin texted my father directly. "Dad, did you see this about Sara?" My father opened the article at his desk between patient consultations. He read it twice. He put his phone face down on his desk. He sat there for several minutes. His nurse knocked to tell him his next patient was ready. He said he needed 5 minutes. My mother found out through Facebook at 10:41 a.m. A friend from her medical school days had shared the LinkedIn announcement with the comment, "Linda, is this your Sara? Congratulations." 4 of my mother's colleagues had liked the post before she even saw it. She called me at 10:49 a.m. I let it ring. I wasn't ready. I wanted her to sit in it for a little while. Not out of cruelty. Out of something harder to name. She called again at 11:00 a.m. I let that one ring too. At 11:17 a.m. she texted, "Sara, people are sending me articles. Please call me." I texted back, "I know. I'll call you tonight." She responded with a thumbs up emoji. My mother has never once in her life sent a thumbs up emoji. Priya called me at noon. She'd been watching my family's social media from the sidelines, providing commentary. "Your mom just posted the Business Insider article on Facebook," she said. Caption is, "So proud of my daughter Sara's incredible accomplishment." 8 exclamation points. I counted. I closed my eyes. "Sara," Priya said carefully. "She told everyone you were doing some work in marketing?" "I know. She is currently accepting congratulations from 40 people in the comments." "I know." We sat in silence for a second. "How are you doing?" Priya asked. "I honestly don't know yet," I said. Kevin called me that afternoon. He was the first family member I talked to because Kevin has always been the easiest of all of them. "Hey," he said, "that's a huge deal, like actually huge. I had no idea you were doing all of that." "I know. Why didn't you tell us?" I thought about how to answer that. Because every time I came home, nobody asked. He was quiet for a moment. "That's fair," he said. "That's really fair. I'm sorry about that." A pause. "Dad's kind of freaking out. Just so you know." "What do you mean freaking out?" "Yes, so you know." "What do you mean freaking out?" "Like, quiet. You know how he gets quiet." I did know. "He's going to call you," Kevin said. "I think he wants to say something." "Okay, for what it's worth," Kevin said, "I think what you did is legitimately impressive. You should be proud of yourself." "Thank you," I said. "I mean that." My father called at 7:22 p.m. I answered. "Sara," he said. His voice was different, careful in a way it usually wasn't. "Hi, Dad." A pause. I saw the article. I figured. The Business Insider piece? Another pause. And the press release? Yes. How long has this been? He stopped, started again. When did this all happen? I filed the LLC the week before I withdrew from law school, I said. I signed my first client 10 days later. Silence. I could hear him breathing. That was 2 years ago. 23 months. Another silence. Then you should have told us. And there it was. Not I'm sorry. Not we were wrong. You should have told us. I tried to tell you, I said, every time I came home. Every time I said work is going well and nobody followed up. I tried to tell you at Christmas 2 years ago, and you told me marketing wasn't a career path, it was a hobby. Your word, hobby. Sara, I'm not angry, I said, and I was surprised to find that was mostly true. I just want you to understand why I didn't tell you. He was quiet for a long time. I'm proud of you, he said finally. The words sounded like they'd taken effort, like he'd had to locate them somewhere unfamiliar. What you built, that's not nothing. Thank you, I said. That means something. Are you coming home soon? I don't know yet. Your mother would like to see you. I'll call her tonight. We hung up. I sat on my couch for a while. It wasn't the conversation I'd imagined, but it was something. A start of something, maybe. I wasn't sure yet what I wanted it to be the start of. I called my mother at 9 p.m. Sara, she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the first syllable. Why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said. A few times, it didn't land. We would have supported you. I didn't argue with that. I could have. Instead, I said, I know you believe that. She was quiet. Then, I've been getting messages all day. People I haven't spoken to in years. I know I didn't. She paused. I didn't know how to answer them. I didn't know what to say about your work because I didn't actually know what you'd been doing. I know, Mom. That's my fault, she said. I think that's my fault. It was the closest she'd ever come. I felt something loosen in my chest a little. We can talk more when I come home, I said. I'll come down next month. I'd like that, she said. Her voice was quiet and a little small in a way I'd never heard from her. I really would. Lily texted me that night at 11:46 p.m. She was post-call, clearly exhausted, because her texts had the grammar of someone whose frontal lobe had temporarily logged off. Okay, I've been on shift since yesterday and I just got home and saw everything and I have to say, Sara. Also, Mom has been texting me all day asking if I knew and I said yes because I guessed it and she is mad. Not at you, at herself, I think. Anyway, I love you and you're a genius and I'm telling everyone in my residency program. I laughed out loud for the first time all day. I typed back, go to sleep. I love you too. One more thing. Dad called me earlier and asked how performance marketing works. I told him to Google it. He said okay. The next 2 weeks were busy in a way that felt different from all the previous busy. Not the anxiety busy of building something fragile, but the momentum busy of something that had already proven it could stand on its own. Business Insider published the longer profile on February 8th. The headline was, She left law school, started a marketing agency, and sold it for millions before she turned 30. They'd asked me in the interview whether my family had supported the decision. I paused before I answered that. They're traditional in a lot of ways, I said. Medicine is the family language. Business wasn't really in the vocabulary, but I think we're learning to translate. The journalist wrote that the way I'd said it suggested the translation was still in progress. She was right. The article ran on a Friday. By Monday, I had 47 new LinkedIn connection requests, 6 speaking inquiries, and a message from a woman named Dana Cho, who was a third-year law student at Georgetown and had read the piece at midnight in her dorm room and wanted to know if I'd ever considered mentoring people who were thinking about leaving traditional paths. I replied to Dana first. Within 3 weeks of the announcement, I got a message from the founder of a startup incubator at UT Austin asking if I'd be willing to join their advisor board for a semester and mentor early-stage founders on go-to-market strategy. I said yes. I showed up to the first session in a hoodie and running shoes because that's what I'd been wearing when I closed the deal, and it seemed like the right thing to carry forward. There were 12 founders in the room. 4 of them had left graduate programs to start their companies. 2 had left law school specifically. I looked at those 2 for a long time. Whatever brought you into this room, I said, I want you to know that the people who didn't understand it will eventually stop being the loudest voice in your head. That takes a while, but it happens. One of the law school ones raised her hand. Did it happen for you? I thought about my father's voice on the phone. I'm proud of you. Located somewhere unfamiliar. It's happening, I said. In March, I went back to Houston. My mother made fruit from scratch, which is her version of an apology, elaborate and nourishing and wordless. My father and I sat at the kitchen counter while she cooked, and he asked me about the earnout structure and I explained it, and he listened in a way he hadn't before. Not to redirect, just to understand. At one point he said, I didn't know what I didn't know. I know, I said, I should have asked more. Yes, he nodded. He looked at his coffee mug. Your grandmother called me after the birthday dinner. She said I was being a fool. He almost smiled. I told her she was exaggerating. She told me she had been watching you for 2 years build something and that I should open my eyes. I thought about Ba's hand squeezing mine under the table. She told me, he said quietly, that you reminded her of herself, starting with nothing, not waiting for permission. I didn't say anything. She was right, he said. About all of it, that was the conversation I'd been waiting for, I realized. Not the Forbes announcement version. Not the confrontation scene. Just my father at a kitchen counter, saying the words while my mother made soup in the next room. It was smaller than I'd imagined it would be. And it was enough. I drove back to Austin the next evening with the windows down because it was one of those early March days in Texas where the air finally stops fighting you. I was thinking about what came next. The PE firm wanted me focused on advising 3 of their other agencies through their first year post-acquisition. I was figuring out whether to start something new, what shape it would take, whether I wanted to move, what I actually wanted now that I'd proven the thing I'd needed to prove. I didn't have all the answers yet. Priya called when I was about an hour outside the city. How was it? She asked. Good, I said. Really, actually good. Did your dad say anything real? Yeah, I said. He did. How do you feel? I thought about it. The highway stretched ahead. The radio was on low. I had $2.6 million in my account and a meeting Monday morning and a mentee who had emailed me 3 times in the past week with questions about her pitch deck, all of which were good questions. Like I can stop waiting for something to happen, I said. Like it already happened and I can just live now. Priya was quiet for a second. Yeah, she said softly. That sounds about right. I kept driving. Houston behind me. Austin ahead, the flat Texas dark on both sides of the road. I thought about the night I signed my first client on that old couch with a bottle of Topo Chico and a legal pad. I thought about all the dinners where I'd sat there saying fine and good and some marketing work while having a whole life nobody bothered to ask about. I thought about the way it felt to say leave and mean it and then go to work anyway. I didn't need them to have believed in me from the beginning. That wasn't possible now, and grieving it too long was its own kind of trap. But I needed them to see me clearly, finally, without the filter of what they'd expected me to be, and slowly, imperfectly, with the particular stubbornness of people who had been wrong for a long time and were only just beginning to accept it. They were starting to. I got home at 11:30 p.m., let myself in, made tea, sat at my counter in the dark for a while with no laptop open, no phone in my hand, just the quiet. It was mine. I'd built it. Nobody had given me the blueprint or the funding or the permission. I'd left a room where they decided who I was, and in the time it took them to notice I was gone, I'd become someone else entirely. Not for them, for the version of myself that had known, even at 26 sitting in a law school classroom feeling wrong in every bone, that there was something truer waiting if I was willing to go find it. I found it. That's the part they'll never fully understand, and I've made peace with that. They didn't need to witness the building of it to benefit from what it became, which was not a portfolio or an acquisition or a press release. It was a daughter who finally stopped waiting to be seen and started simply being. That was always going to be enough. I used to think the hardest part was leaving. Walking away from something you were supposed to want, something your whole family had decided was the right life for you before you were old enough to have an opinion about it. But the hardest part wasn't leaving law school. The hardest part was the silence after. The years of sitting at dinner tables while everyone spoke around you and understanding that you had made yourself unreadable to the people who were supposed to know you best. My father is a surgeon. He spent 30 years learning to read bodies, to find what's wrong and fix it with precision. But he couldn't read me. He looked at a daughter who was building something real and saw someone who had given up. He looked at my apartment and saw a person without direction. He never once thought to ask what I was actually doing in there, and the thing I've had to sit with, the uncomfortable part, is that I let that go on. I showed up to those dinners. I said fine and good and some marketing work. I chose silence over confrontation, and there were consequences to that choice too. What I've come to understand is that actions accumulate. Every choice you make and every choice you don't make builds something. My father's choice to measure his children against a single standard year after year built a wall between him and a daughter he didn't know. My choice to stay quiet rather than fight for my own story built a version of me in their minds that had nothing to do with who I actually was. We were both in our own ways responsible for the distance. The moment it shifted wasn't the acquisition, it wasn't the Business Insider article or the 47 LinkedIn requests, or my mother posting congratulations she hadn't earned the right to post yet. It was my father at the kitchen counter saying, "I didn't know what I didn't know." That sentence cost him something. I could tell. A man who had been certain his whole life, certain about medicine and legacy and the one correct way to build a life, sitting there admitting a gap in himself, that took something I hadn't expected from him. Priya told me once, the night I signed my first client, that I was going to outgrow all of them. She meant it literally and she was right, but outgrowing someone doesn't have to mean leaving them behind. It can mean becoming large enough to stop needing their approval and then, from that larger place, choosing whether or not to let them back in. That's a choice that belongs entirely to you. What I tell anyone in a room they don't belong in, at a table where someone is using a speech to remind you of your place, is this: the work is the answer, not the revenge, not the reveal, not the moment they find out. The work itself. The quiet, unglamorous 2 a.m. work of building something you actually believe in, that work will outlast every dinner where you were made to feel small. It has a longer memory than the people who doubted you, and it will still be standing long after they've revised their version of events to include themselves in your success. Sara didn't need her family to believe in her first. She just needed to believe in herself long enough for the truth to become undeniable. That's not a story about winning. It's a story about what happens when you stop waiting for permission and start.